Avoidants regret losing the one person who truly got them. We all know someone who keeps people at arm's length. They crave connection, but the moment someone gets close-up, they run. These are avoidants. People who grew up believing closeness meant danger, emotional chaos, pain, or feeling trapped. So they learn to protect themselves by staying detached. But here's the twist: one day, they meet someone different, someone who gets them, someone patient, empathetic, someone who isn't trying to fix them but simply sees through their walls and says, I see you, I accept you. And for a while, this works. Laughter, late night conversations, maybe even moments of vulnerability. The avoidant feels something raring, safety. But then it happens. The panic sets in. What if I get hurt? What if I lose myself? And so they push away, they pull back, they convince themselves, this is too much. They're not right for me. They leave. They think it's a clean break, that they'll be fine. But weeks pass, months, sometimes years, and suddenly it hits them. They lost the one person who truly saw them and stayed. Not because of needness, not because of pressure, but because of love without demand. And that kind of love is rare. By the time they realize it, the other person has moved on. Because love requires reciprocity, not just understanding. Avoidants don't regret leaving just anyone. They regret leaving the person who met them where they were, saw who they could be, and still chose them. Day after day. So if you're that avoidant, ask yourself, are you pushing away someone who's trying to love you for who you are? Because the cost of safety shouldn't be regret. People who identify with avoidant attachment carry invisible scars from their earliest emotional experiences. It's not that they don't want love or connection. It's that they've learned, sometimes without even realizing it, that closeness comes with a cost. Somewhere along the line, they were taught either through inconsistency, emotional neglect, or overwhelming demands that intimacy isn't safe, that opening up leads to hurt, that needing someone is weakness. So they build walls, not out of arrogance, not because they don't care, but because they believe those walls are what keep them sane, strong, and in control. An avoidant may look calm and confident on the outside, but underneath, there's often a constant inner dialogue trying to maintain emotional distance. Don't get too close. They'll let you down. You're better off alone. These aren't just thoughts, they're survival strategies. When someone starts to matter too much, their nervous system doesn't register it as love, it registers it as danger. The closer someone gets, the more exposed they feel. Vulnerability becomes threatening, not empowering. Because of this, they often mistake genuine emotional intimacy for pressure or control. When a partner expresses a need, an avoidant doesn't hear, I care about you. They hear, I'm going to overwhelm you. So they retreat, they shut down, withdraw, or deflect with logic and sarcasm. It's not that they don't feel, they do, deeply. But the emotions feel unmanageable, like opening a door to a flood they're not equipped to handle. This pattern often confuses their partners. To the person loving them, the avoidant seems emotionally distant or uninterested. But the truth is, avoidants often care more than they let on. They just don't know how to express it safely. They want connection, but on their terms, and without the emotional exposure that usually comes with it. This is why surface-level relationships feel easier for them. There's less at stake, less vulnerability, less risk of being truly seen. The tragedy is that many avoidants are unaware of how much their fear of closeness sabotages their chances of finding the very thing they long for, real, meaningful connection. They think they're protecting themselves, but what they're often doing is replaying an old story from childhood, that getting close leads to pain, that needing others makes you weak. That love always comes with a cost. And so they repeat the cycle, keeping people at a safe distance, not realizing that their safety is what's keeping them lonely, until someone comes along who doesn't buy into the act. Someone who sees the fear behind the silence, the tenderness behind the avoidance. That's when the avoidant is faced with something new. Someone willing to stay even when they pull away. And for the first time, the possibility of real connection flickers. but only if they recognize what's happening. Only if they realize that the fear they've been listening to isn't truth. It's just a defense mechanism that no longer serves them. When someone with an avoidant attachment style meets the right person, it doesn't always start with a dramatic spark. It often begins with a subtle, unfamiliar feeling: ease. This person doesn't chase, doesn't pressure, doesn't try to decode every word or force emotional declarations. They just are present, calm, grounded. They offer a type of emotional safety that the avoidant isn't used to. They don't come in demanding closeness or trying to dismantle walls. They simply sit at the edge of them with patience, showing through their actions that they can be trusted. That's when the avoidant starts to feel something shift. This kind of parter doesn't interpret emotional distance as rejection. They see it as fear. They don't get reactive when the avoidant pulls back. They stay centered. That doesn't mean they tolerate being mistreated. It means they understand the difference between space and disinterest. They know how to hold emotional boundaries without becoming cold or punishing. This is someone who doesn't take silence personally, who listens between the lines, who sees the avoidant's independence not as a threat, but as part of their personality. They try to fix the avoidant. They don't push them to become more open before they're ready. And that's exactly what starts to create the space for transformation. Over time, the avoidant begins to feel less like they need to perform. They can relax. They can express themselves, maybe not all at once, but in small ways that feel safe, a reply. And instead of being met with criticism or confusion, they're met with understanding. That's powerful. That's healing, because the avoidant has likely gone through life believing that no one could really get them, that no one would be patient enough to stick around long enough to see what's underneath the armor. But now someone has, and not only do they see it, they accept it. This is where emotional breakthroughs happen. Not because the avoidant has changed overnight, but because they finally feel seen. They're not being judged for needing space. They're not being punished for their caution. The other person doesn't make their love conditional on constant closeness or emotional expression. Instead, they communicate that they're here when the avoidant is ready. That level of unconditional presence can be disarming. For someone who's spent years on emotional high alert, bracing for rejection or engulfment, this is a completely new experience. What makes this person so rare isn't just their patience, it's their discernment. They know when to give space, but they also know their worth. They're not waiting forever. They're not endlessly sacrificing their emotional needs. They're holding a mirror up to the avoidant. I accept you as you are, but I also deserve to be loved in return. That's what makes the avoidant start to shift. Not guilt, not pressure, but a calm, steady love that challenges their old beliefs and shows them what a healthy bond actually feels like. A connection based not on fear, but on mutual respect and emotional freedom. When someone with an avoidant attachment style begins to experience real closeness, it can trigger a response that feels like panic. To the outside world, it might look like things are going well. They're laughing, sharing, maybe even letting someone in emotionally. But internally, there's a pressure building, a quiet alarm going off. The more emotionally available the other person becomes, the more the avoidant starts to feel overwhelmed. Vulnerability, for them, often feels unsafe. It's not about the other person doing something wrong. It's about an old internal wiring that equates closeness with a loss of autonomy, or worse, the anticipation of pain. The irony is that avoidants often crave love deeply. They want the comfort, the connection, the sense of being known. But as soon as that becomes a reality, they instinctively start to retreat. It's not calculated. It's protective. That internal voice kicks in, whispering, "This is too much. They're getting too close. You're going to lose yourself." So they find subtle, or not so subtle, ways to diss themselves. Maybe they become critical. Maybe they focus on flaws that weren't there before. Maybe they convince themselves the chemistry is fading. Sometimes they even walk away completely, not because they don't care, but because staying feels like losing control. They'll often rationalize it in ways that make sense to them. I just need space. This isn't the right time. I'm not ready. These aren't always lies, but they're rarely the full truth. The truth is that the avoidant is scared that if they fully lean in, they'll get hurt, that they'll be smothered, that they'll give too much of themselves away and lose the independence they worked so hard to protect. What they don't always realize is that pushing away a good thing doesn't protect them. It isolates them. The person trying to love them begins to feel rejected, confused, and eventually hurt. And the deeper tragedy is that the avoidant often feels hurt too, but doesn't know how to express it. This fear of losing autonomy makes it hard for avoidants to see that intimacy doesn't have to mean enmeshment. They've been trained to associate emotional closeness with suffocation, so even healthy connection can feel threatening. That's why they tend to feel most comfortable in situations where there's distance. Emotionally unavailable partners, long-distance relationships, or dynamics where they hold the power. But once someone comes along who genuinely offers stability and emotional availability, the old wiring is challenged, and that's when the push-pull dynamic begins. Even though the avoidant may feel a strong emotional bond, the moment it starts to feel real, the instinct to self-protect overrides the desire to connect. They pull away not because the relationship is wrong, but because their internal map for relationships is built on avoidance. What they often miss is that the discomfort they feel isn't always a sign that something's wrong with the relationship. It's a sign that something inside them is being asked to heal. But healing takes awareness, and unfortunately, many avoidants don't realize what's happening until the relationship is already slipping away. Regret is a slow burn for the avoidant. In the moment of walking away, they often feel relief, like they've escaped something too intense, too demanding, too close. There's a sense of freedom, space, control returning. They tell themselves it was the right choice, that maybe the other person just wasn't the one, that they were better off alone anyway. But time has a way of revealing what logic tries to cover up, and what often surfaces later isn't peace, but a growing sense of loss. Specifically, the loss of the one person who truly saw them. Avoidants don't regret every breakup. They can walk away from surface level relationships and feel nothing. But when they meet someone who truly connects with them, who understands their fears without shaming them, who responds to their silence with patience instead of panic, who shows up with consistency, they're affected more than they know. That person isn't just another partner. They're a mirror. They reflect back what's possible: intimacy without pressure, connection without control, love without manipulation. That kind of presence is rare. And even if the avoidant didn't fully allow themselves to appreciate it at the time, they feel its absence later on in a profound way. It often starts subtly. They'll remember a laugh, a quiet moment, a conversation where they felt understood in a way that didn't demand more from them. They'll recall how safe it felt, even if it scared them. Over time, those memories gather weight, and with that weight comes the realization that person got me, really got me, and I pushed them away. It's not just regret over losing someone, they're mourning the rare connection where they didn't have to pretend, perform, or protect themselves. Where they were accepted, even in their guardedness. This is when the internal conflict becomes sharp. Part of them wants to reach out to fix it. But avoidants also carry pride, fear of vulnerability, and the shame of having shut down something meaningful. They may check in from a distance, watch their stories, send a casual message, ask mutual friends how they're doing, without ever admitting what they feel. The regret stays quietly buried, surfacing in private moments when they see a photo, hear a song, or experience something they instinctively want to share with that one person they let go. That regret is compounded when they realize the other person hasn't waited. That while they were creating distance, the person who once saw them so clearly has moved on. Because no matter how much understanding and patience someone offers, love cannot thrive alone. Eventually, even the most empathetic partner needs to feel chosen, valued, and emotionally safe. When they stop trying, stop reaching out, stop showing up, it's not bitterness, it's survival. It's honoring their own worth. For the avoidant, that's often when the full weight of the loss hits. Not just the person, but the opportunity to grow, to change, to have a different kind of relationship than they've known. They didn't just lose someone. They lost the person who saw the best in them, even when they couldn't see it themselves. Love cannot survive on one person's understanding alone. While patience and empathy can carry a relationship through difficult phases, there comes a point when even the most compassionate heart needs to feel met. Avoidants are often drawn to people who offer emotional steadiness, individuals who are calm, clear, and not reactive. These partners can navigate the avoidance need for space with grace, knowing when to lean in and when to step back. But even the most grounded person eventually needs to feel like their emotional effort is reciprocated. Avoidants tend to misread this balance. They often assume that because someone understands their fear of closeness, that person will always wait. That the depth of their connection will be enough to keep that person holding on, even without much emotional nourishment in return. They count on that understanding to cover up the gaps created by distance, withdrawal, and avoidance. But the truth is, empathy has a limit. When love becomes one-sided, it begins to quietly erode. Not from anger, but from depletion. The partner who truly saw them, who stayed through the confusing behavior, the emotional shutdowns, the push and pull, eventually reaches a quiet conclusion. Understanding isn't enough. They realize that they've been loving someone who hasn't fully chosen them. And no matter how much compassion they feel for the avoidance past, no matter how clear they see the fear behind the distance, they still need to feel emotionally safe themselves. They need to feel wanted, valued, prioritized, not just tolerated or occasionally let in when it feels convenient. What makes this dynamic so tragic is that avoidants often realize the value of the relationship only after it's too late. They believed they had more time, that the other person would keep trying, keep showing up. But what they didn't realize is that every unmet need, every unanswered moment, every instance where love was withheld in the name of self-protection added weight to the other person's heart. And eventually, the one who stayed finally stops, not with a dramatic exit, but with quiet detachment, a shift. A final understanding love isn't love if it's not returned. Avoidants often confuse space with safety, but real emotional safety comes from mutual effort. It comes from both people feeling seen, heard, and emotionally nourished. When one person is doing all the emotional heavy lifting, it stops being a relationship and becomes a rescue mission. The avoidant might not see this clearly in the moment. They may feel relief when the pressure of intimacy disappears. But when the silence stretches on, when they notice the absence instead of the presence, the realization comes. The one person who truly accepted them is gone, not because they didn't care, but because they had to protect their own heart. Understanding is powerful, but it isn't infinite. For love to survive, there must be movement from both sides. Even a small gesture, a moment of vulnerability, a sign that the avoidant is willing to try. These things matter, because without them, even the most beautiful connection fades into a memory of what could have been. At the heart of every avoidant is a person who's simply trying to stay safe. They've built walls not to keep others out, but to keep pain out. But in doing so, they often end up keeping out the very thing they crave the most. Love that's real, consistent, and accepting. And when that love finally shows up, it doesn't come with fireworks or drama. It comes quietly, with patience, with grace, with someone saying, "I'm here and I see you." That's not just romantic, it's rare. And when that kind of person walks away, not because they stopped caring, but because they finally had to care for themselves, the regret cuts deep. So whether you're someone who loves an avoidant or you are the avoidant, remember this understanding is powerful, but it's not a substitute for action. Love can't survive in a vacuum. It needs reciprocity. It needs bravery. It needs you to show up, even if it's imperfect, even if it's messy. Because the people who truly get us, they don't come around every day. And once they're gone, the silence they leave behind is often louder than anything they ever said. Don't wait until the moment they stop trying. Don't let fear speak louder than your heart. Thank you for listening and for holding space for a conversation that many avoid, but so many need. Whether you're healing, reflecting, or learning to love better, you're not alone. Keep showing up for yourself and for the ones who matter. The courage to love, even when it scares you, is the bravest thing you'll ever do. Take care of your heart and don't let the right one slip away. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.